Hello everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Welcome to another Python lists lesson where we're going through the idea of creating and modifying and editing and all sorts of things, doing all of that with lists and using Python to do that. And it makes our code much easier to use. So last lesson, we were looking at all the different types of methods that you could use in Python lists. So this lesson, we're going to continue doing some of that. And at the beginning of the lesson, I'm just going to go through a few of those ideas. So today's lesson, we're going to look at understanding the different methods used to interact with lists in Python. And we're going to also be looking at how to use loops in interaction with lists. And we're also going to look at how to search for individual items from these lists. Okay. So first task I want you to do, just to recap what you did last lesson, please could you go on to tinyurl.com/list tracer. It's a link that I've created. Please can you also try and get as many of those correct as possible. You should be able to see, you might want to have a look at the code that I made. I created this piece of code. It wasn't gotten from somewhere else, but I want you to have a go at them. And remember these methods, okay? So append adds a value to the end of a list. That special word append means add. Insert adds a value at a point in a list and moves everything else along one. So if you're inserting a value at a certain index, it will go there. So you're inserting the particular value and everything else moves along one. List index equals value. That changes the list value at a given index. So it will, if you said list 0 equals dog, then it will change whatever was in list 0 to dog instead of whatever it was originally. Pop index will remove a value at that particular index from a list. So if you said pop 5, then it will remove the 5th. Don't forget we count from 0, so it will actually be the 6th item in the list. Just pop with the brackets removes the last index value from a list. And then remove value is very similar to pop, but it removes a given value from a list instead of a value at a particular index. Once you have had a go at this, please send me a screenshot of what you've done in Show My Homework to get a contribution to the lesson point. I'm going to try and give up to 3 points per lesson, depending on what I receive from you. So first point is based on whether you've turned up. Second point is based on one of the earlier tasks, and the third point is based on one of the later tasks. So have a go at that. I'm going to play some music in the meantime, and yeah, enjoy doing that. If you've got any questions, please post them in the chat. All right, guys, let me know if you've managed to finish. I'm going to play one more song just to have you have a bit more time, but keep going. Right, okay, so hopefully that was quite useful for you to get your head back into the idea of the different types of things you can do in using a list. Was there any that people feel that they struggled with? I know that in the past, insert has been quite a difficult one to get your head around. Being able to say insert a particular value at a given index, the fact that they're that way around can sometimes confuse people. Pop can be a bit confusing just because there's two different types. There's one that has a number in it, and if it doesn't have a number in it, it's just getting rid of the last value from a list. Remove values quite straightforward usually. And append, that's just trying to remember what that word means. It just means add to the end. All right. If there are any particular questions, let me know, but otherwise I'm just going to take that as that you've managed to do that. Don't forget to save a screenshot so that you can post it into Show My Homework later, or now if you've got the chance to be able to do that before we move on. But just make sure you saved it before we move on to the next part. Okay, so remember for loops. So our for x in range, whatever, and then print our value. So remember how that works. We go for, let me bring it over so you can see. Let's zoom in a bit. Whoops. For x in range, for print x. Now what does that do? That goes through each value of x, which will be 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, and then it will print those out. So it says 0, then 1, then 2, then 3. Okay, remember that? So think about the fact that in a list, we've got different values in our lists. Say we've got John, Paul, Fred, and Ringo. If we use a for loop, we can use our loop counter to step through each value. So first it would be friends 0, then friends 1, and so on and so on. So I want you to have a go at that. If you just copy this code into a trinket, so don't forget you can go to jump2.cc/Python new. I've just posted that in the chat so that you can access it really quickly if you need to. All you need to, it will just be able to print out each value rather than you having to say print friends 1 and then print friends 2, or print friends 0, print friends 1, print friends 2, etc., etc. A loop is really helpful in this. Okay, I hope you can kind of see that idea that we've got different items in our loop. We've got friends x is referring to this x here, which will be different depending on where in the loop we are. Okay, so hopefully you can kind of see that. I'm just going to put that into my trinket. In fact, let me put it over here for now, just so that you can friends equals John, Paul. I know you can't see this at the moment. I'm just making sure that you can still see what you should be typing in before I get rid of it. Okay, so just going to change this last bit, print friends, and then don't forget your square brackets here, friends x. Okay, so now if I do this, it'll print out John, then Paul, then Fred, then Ringo. Okay, hopefully you can kind of see fairly straightforwardly how this relates to this x here, which is usually going to be 0, 1, 2, 3. And instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, because we're referring to the 0th item in our list, the first item in our list, the second and the third, as in index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, that is what we're talking about there, that it prints out the value instead of a number that time. Okay, so that can be one really useful thing that we can do to step through a list. But what happens if we want to add more items to our list? If we appended, hang on a second, let's go back a moment. If we appended an item to our list, if we say friends.append, and I'm going to append, I don't know, who did we have before? George. Right, I'm going to append George to the end. And then if I run it, it still only gives me John, Paul, Fred, and Ringo. Why is that? Well, there are now 5 items in the list, not just 4. So when I've got this 4 here, I have to change it every time I add something to my list. And now it will run and give me the 5th item as well. If I was to kind of go, oh, well, I'll do it to 100 and make sure that even if there's 100 items in the list, it will still print them all. Then we're going to get an error because we're going out of range. So it's gone to John, then Paul, then Fred, then Ringo, then George. That's the 5th item in the list, or otherwise known as the index 4. Once it says, can you print out index 5? We have the same issue as we had before. So we have, it goes, there isn't a 5th item in the list. There isn't index 5. There isn't an index 5 in this list. So that range needs to be the correct length all the time. Now there are 2 ways of being able to do this. So you can manually type it in. There's one other thing you could do and say, let's create a variable here called len friends. Okay, so this is finding the length of our list. Now, lists have some very useful methods in them. You can find out the length of a list by just putting len brackets friends. Okay, this will find out how long our list is. No matter how long that list is, it will be correct. So then I can just put len friends here, and it will be the same each time. Or I could just put len friends like this. I can't use the word len as a variable name because that is the same as this special word here. You can see, hopefully, I don't know if you can see actually. No, it won't let me zoom in all the way. You should be able to see that this changes color and it won't allow you to use it. So you could say length instead. And we'll do it like that. Oops, I've spelt it wrong. There we go. And then, so if I press play, it'll run. And even if I put friends.append, let me think. Who else do I want to add in? John, Paul, George, Fred, Ringo, Barry. Let's add Barry. All right. Even if I add in another person, it won't matter how many people I add in. It will add that to the list, and I don't have to keep changing this value each time. So that's one way of doing it, but there's actually a slightly easier way of doing it as well, and I'll go on to this next slide to show you what I'm talking about. So what you can do is say for friend in friends. So because friends is a list, you're going to you've got a list of friends. This is like saying for X in friends, and it's just going for each item in my list. So friend is actually referring to the specific item in the list. So it's like saying for each item in my list. In other forms, we call this a for each loop, because it goes through each item in the list. Now, I could write any value here. It could be X, it could be elephant, it could be whatever I want it to be, okay? But I've used the word friend because each of these items is hopefully a friend, yeah? So John is a friend, Paul is a friend, Fred is a friend, Ringo is a friend, etc. So this code will do the exact same thing as the code we had before, but it can refer to each item in the list without having to know which index it's working at. So it's printing out the value of that friend. So I'll quickly show you how that works. Let me adjust some of this code a little bit. So even if I comment out my appends, and so let me come back to this. So I've got for friend in friends. So we've got one friend that's inside our list of friends. We're going to print out friend. Ooh, not friends. Friends will print out the whole list. Friend will print out one item from the list. Oops, I forgot my colon. There we go. So it'll say John, Paul, Fred, Ringo. If I add back in my append, it'll add in George as well. I don't have to keep changing that value like we had before. All right. So this is a really useful way of being able to go through a list and say, this is the item in my list. You could even say things like for line in, and it would be friends or whatever the name of your list is. So this is just the name of a variable that you want to refer to one of the items in your list, and this is just the name of the list itself. So if I change this to line, it will still print out the same thing as it did before. You can't really see the difference because it's if I clear it and then run it again, you can see that it's done the exact same thing as it did before, because I've just put this, as long as these two values are the same, that will work. Okay, so this is the variable name that I'm using to refer to an individual item inside my list of whatever the name of the list is, goes here. So again, I can call this whatever I want. It doesn't have to be called line, it doesn't have to be called friend, it can be called whatever I want, as long as I can use that in my loop somehow. Sometimes you don't even want to use the item in your loop. Sometimes you might go, okay, I want to make sure that every item in my, if there are 12 items in my if there are 12 items in my list, I'm going to add 12 things, which you could easily do using len, but there are lots of different ways of going about programming things, as we've already established in the past. So this is another way. I hope I've been able to explain that well enough. It's kind of difficult to tell how well I've explained it without seeing your faces. But if there's any questions, any particular questions about how that works, please ask. Okay, I'm going to move on. We're going to look at also how you can search lists line by line, or you can try a simpler shortcut. So you can kind of go, you can kind of do this, where you go for line in friends if, oh hang on, I'm going to change it to friend again just to make it a little less complicated. If friend, so if friend is equal to Paul, then I'm going to say print found him. Okay, else print not here. Okay, so I could say something like that. If my friend is Paul, then I'm going to print out found him. So he's not here, found him, not here, not here, not here, not here. You can see that each time that it's not Paul, it's printing out not here, because on the 0th one it's not there, but it is in the first one, or the first index number 1. It says found him, and then Fred is not there. It's not a Paul, is it? Ringo is not Paul, George is not Paul, and Barry's not Paul. So that kind of works, but it's a bit complicated adding this, that's 4 lines of code there to add, including your for loop as well. And it's going through every item in the list, and it's a bit much, really. So what we want Python to be able to do is look through. So we've just done the searching our list line by line, or we can use our simplest shortcut, where we say if the value we are looking for is in the list that we are searching, then we're going to print out found him. Otherwise, we're going to say he's not there. So let's have a go at that. So I don't have to go through my list like this. I can even comment all that out, but I'm not going to, because it's a bit more complicated to do it on this. So I can say if Paul in friends, print found him. Else print he's not here. He's not in this list. Okay, so if I run that code, oops, what have I done wrong? Oh, my indentation is incorrect. Let's just fix that. So he is in the list. Paul is in my list of friends. Now I can change this to a different value. Let's see, Velma. Well, not Velma, because Velma's not a he. Let's think. Tim. If Tim in friends, then we're going to print found him. He is not in this list. Is Tim in that list? No, we can kind of see that by looking at it, but we wouldn't necessarily know that when running a very complicated piece of code with lots and lots of items in the list. I hope that kind of makes some amount of sense for you. So if you know a value is in the list, you can also find out where in the list they are. So this here, friends.index, that tells you the index of that value. Okay, so if I do the same idea again, you could even say if Paul in friends, print index friends.index. Don't forget, we're writing the name of the list here, the index in that list of Paul. Okay, so we're printing out that value. It is at index number 1 because don't forget, item number 0 is John, item number 0 is John, item 1 is Paul, 2 is Fred, 3 is Ringo, etc. If I was to change this, I could say Tim in friends and print the index of Tim. It shouldn't print anything, okay, which is useful, but what if we got rid of that if statement as well? What would happen? Would that create an error? Well, let's have a look. Yeah, it creates an error. So Tim is not in the list. So you would need that last bit of code to check to see if that value is in the list to make sure that works. Sometimes they will return a different value like -1 to allow you to make it clear that that item is not in the list, but it's usually a lot better than that. But you can see that Tim is not in that list of friends, so it's not going to print anything out. Okay. Okay. So our next thing that I would like you to do is go onto the tinyURL, go into Practical Intermediate Programming. Last week we looked at a document called Using Lists. This week I'd like you to go on to Using Lists 2. I don't know if that was last week or the week before, but whichever it was, I want you to go on to the next one. There is an extra one in there that wasn't there last time. So please send me your completed document and show my homework, and then I will give you an excellent work point. Okay, I haven't yet seen, in fact, no, I haven't yet seen anyone submit their screenshots from the earlier task. Please make sure by the end of this lesson, or maybe not by the end of this lesson, but by a couple of hours after this lesson is finished, can you make sure that document has been sent and that screenshot has been sent? Then I can give you 3 points because you were here on time, you got your excellent work for completing this one, you're using list 2, and you got your screenshot for the task at the very beginning of the lesson. Okay, so hopefully you should have a go at that and be able to do well at that. If you're having trouble with anything, please let me know. As I've already mentioned plenty of times before, just mention it in the chat, or if you're too worried that people are looking in the chat, then post it on Show My Homework. I will try and keep an eye on both, but I will be keeping an eye on the chat a little bit more than I will on Show My Homework at the moment. Okay, so yeah, have a go at that. Where have I put my there we go. So have a go. Okay, guys, so let me know in the chats how far you've gotten so far. This is what we should be looking at. So predicting your code to figure out what you would see if you were to run this program without copying it in. And then once you had copied it, once you'd made your prediction, you can type up the program, see if you're correct. Then alter the program so that it adds Graham to the list correctly. Alter the program so it prints out all 5 names, but one at a time. Using a for loop, okay, like we've just talked about. And then carrying on from there. So I'm going to go through with you from probably the first couple of items just to see where we're at. Again, please let me know how far you've gotten in the chat so that I can have a go at what you've got. So if you, in your answers, just add, when you're saving this, please, on a new line, just write in the code that you've put into the trinket, and that'll allow me to see that you understand how this works. Okay, so you would write down your prediction here. Hopefully you've already done that, and then typing up the program, and then saying, maybe writing afterwards saying, this is what I got wrong and this is what I got right, or something like that. So on this one, we're predicting Monty Python is John, Michael, Terry, Eric. If you have ever seen Monty Python, you will understand that these are the 4 main people from Monty Python. Monty Python 4 becomes Graham and prints out Monty Python. So what you should have been able to predict is that this is 0, 1, 2, 3. What will happen is an error because we're trying to add a 4th item, an item onto index number 4. And index number 4 doesn't exist because 0, 1, 2, and 3. Don't forget that it starts at 0. Okay, so if we copy that into our, let me find a version of trinket that I've got ready to go. There we go. Put that into there. Let's just get rid of that and paste over it. And again, all of these plus quotes. Just going to put in, let's see if I can find and replace. If it'll allow me to do that. Ooh, let me zoom out a little bit because I don't know if that's affecting it. Reset. No. All. No, it's just okay. And if I put in, yes, that's perfect. Right. So every time, oh no, that didn't quite work the way I wanted it to. Oh well, let's just get rid of any time it says quat, because I've added now somehow. Oh, and I've got that there as well. Oh my goodness. Probably should have typed it all in. It would have been quicker. Quat. Terry. Quat. Still need that comma. I'll get rid of that. Quat. There we go. Okay. And then get rid of these ones as well. Graham. There we go. Okay, right. Hopefully you'll be able to see that we've got an error. Okay, index out of range, because 4 is the 4 at the 4th index. It is not in range. So alter the program so it adds Graham to the list correctly. Hopefully you are able to just change this. Oops, let me get rid of that for a minute. You're able to just change this line here to say Monty Python dot append and then brackets Graham with closing brackets. Okay, and then I press play and it's now given me those 5 people in the list rather than just 4. Okay, So that was item number 1. What does it say for, 1 and 2? Now it says alter the program so it prints out all 5 names but one at a time. You should use a for loop to do this. So instead of giving me all of these square brackets and speech marks and commas and all of that, I'm going to create a for loop. So for, remember, our more useful item. So we can say for person in Monty Python, and we're going to print out person instead of Monty Python. Okay, so that goes through each person in that list of Monty Python, and it prints out person. So John, Michael, Terry, Eric, Graham. So hopefully you were able to do that. I'm going to leave you to continue working on number 4 onwards. I'll again leave you a couple of minutes, a couple of songs to go through those, and then I'll see how you're doing from there. All right? Again, I'll give you another couple of minutes to continue. Right, so, oops, didn't realise that was about to start. I thought I had paused it. Right, so where were we? If you let me know where you've just gotten up to in the last few minutes. Right, so we've done the first three. Don't forget to add in your code in between each line when you have finished each part. So the following code will create an empty list of 4 names. So remember this bit. And then it will ask the user for a name to place in the list. So enter the name of a friend. The last line is just there so we can see what the list looks like at the end. What it wants you to do is use a loop so that the program will ask the user for more names to complete the list. The last line should also or still print the complete list out. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this code over, paste it in. Again, anytime it says quat, get rid of that. Oh, my goodness. Should press delete. And then this one here as well. And that should be it. Okay. So one of the things that you might have had an issue with here is the fact that it says your code here. I would personally edit this bit of code to make this work correctly. So there were 2 ways of making a list. If we go back to 2 ways of using loops. Okay, so we had our for loop, which was for x in range 4, print out our list, our name of our friend, or we could have for friend in friends. Okay, so that's the 2 ways we can do it. Now, the way I would do it to make this a loop rather than any old thing, I would say for x in range 4, because we've hard coded in there that there are 4 items in this list. Okay, I'm going to put a colon in there, and then I'm going to tab these both in. Don't forget where the tab key is. It's just above your caps lock key. And it says name equals input, enter the name of a friend. All I then need to do is change this value here where it says friends 0. If I change that to x instead of friends 0, then it will allow me to keep asking different values and then give me a different name each time. So let's run that. Oops, bad input on line 3. I missed one of my speech marks here because of trying to get rid of that quat. Okay, enter the name of a friend. George. Whoops, that wasn't seeming to work. There we go. George. Okay, enter the name of a friend. Paul. Enter the name of a friend. Ringo. And Graham. Okay, so then it prints out George, Paul, Ringo, Graham, exactly like we want it to. Okay, so all I had to do there was add in this line of code and edit this bit here and then make sure these were indented correctly. Other ways you could have done it are saying for friends in friend in friends. I don't know how easy it would be to do it this way because you want to be able to know what the index is to be able to change the name. So for friend in friends, let's see if this works actually, because it's not something I've done before. Friend equals name. John, Paul, George. Whoops. Oh, I've typed it over here. Whoops. I wasn't looking. So try it again. John, Paul, George, Ringo. Yeah, it's still none because if this friend value isn't changing each time. So that's why we need to make it friends x, and we need to make this for x in range 4. So sometimes that for friend in friends is really useful, sometimes it's not. So x in range 4. Okay, press So John, Paul, George, Ringo. I did it again. Oh, need to actually look where I'm typing, for goodness sake. Right, John, Paul, George, getting ahead of myself again, Ringo. And again, it does John, Paul, George, Ringo. Okay, so hopefully you can kind of see the difference there between the 4x in range and the for loop and the for each loop. So the 4x in range and the for friend in friends. Okay, there's two different types that you are useful there. Sometimes it's useful to know what the index is, which is where this 4x in range comes in. Okay. So we've used our loop, so the program will ask the user for more names to complete the list. The last line should still print the complete list out. Okay, number 5. I've seen a few of you were still on number 4. Some of you managed to get to number 5 and number 6, but I'm going to go through number 5 anyway, and hopefully see how you do from there. There'll only be a few more minutes at the end of the lesson to complete this. I'll probably maybe go through one more afterwards, but I'm hoping that you'll be able to complete this and send it to me through Show My Homework. Okay, so where were we? Write a program to store data about DVDs that are for sale. It should start by asking the user to enter 5 film titles using a loop. The program should then print out the list of film titles so the user can check it's right. So we're doing something very similar to what we've just done here. So instead of friends, we're going to say films. Okay, and I'm just going to change this. Films. And then let's see what else it wanted for us. Should print out the list of film titles. Yep. So it asks the user to enter 5 film titles using the list. So enter the name of a film. And then I just change this last bit to films. Okay. So it's pretty much exactly the same. Enter the name of a film. Die Hard. Oh, again, I've done that again. I need to look where I'm typing. Die Hard. Finding Nemo. Cinderella. Oh, I spelled finding incorrect. And let's see, Lord of the Rings. Return of the King. There we go. Okay, so Die Hard, Finding Nemo, Cinderella, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. So I've got those 4 items there. That was very similar to this last one, writing a program to store data about DVDs that are for sale. So you can see that it's the same no matter whether you're talking about friends or about films or about items of groceries or whatever it is you're doing. Okay, I want you to continue working through this. Hopefully you should get to the end of this by the end of the lesson. If not, try and get it finished off and then get it sent to me. Don't forget to add in your code after every section, just so I can see what you've done. And even if I've already gone through it and it's something you didn't understand, don't just change your code so it looks exactly like mine, because I want to see what you've managed to understand. Okay, and that just helps me to see what you've done. I'm not going to not give you the point if you're getting things wrong. The idea is that I want to see what you're getting up to rather than that you've done everything perfectly. Okay, because that's the idea of learning, right? Okay, another couple of songs and then we'll finish the lesson. All right, so I'll probably only do one more song and then we will finish there. Okay. Okay, so I know that wasn't a lot of time, but I just wanted to round up the lesson here so that I don't go too far over an hour. So hopefully you were able to get something out of today's lesson where you were able to understand the different methods used to interact with lists in Python, understand how to use loops in interaction with lists, and understanding how to search for individual items from lists. Again, if you have any questions about how to do anything in particular, then please let me know. It will be interesting to see how many of you want to do the extension task, because that is something we're going to be looking at in the future, two-dimensional lists. So if you feel like you want to get something extra done, that would be something I would recommend for you to do. I will be here the same time next week, so please make sure you submit those bits of work, the screenshot from the different from the first task and the completed sheet from this task that we just finished, or that we just had a go at. Don't forget that because this is a video, that's one of the good things about this. Because this is a video, you can always watch bits back if you were a bit confused by them or if you want to recap them again. Anyway, have a lovely week.